Mr. Chair, we had a I'm concerned about some members of the committee talking about how there's been no hearings on this. With Mr. Hurd, we had a hearing on the 2016 election where we had a number of people from the elections folks come in and asked them very specifically, was there any evidence that the votes in the 2016 election were altered? We had multiple states there, not one, not at a federal level reporting, not at the state level, indicated that votes were in any manner altered. There's no quarrel that outside entities, including Russia, attempted to interfere with our election. Conflating the two gets in the way of doing the job we're trying to do here, which is identify the resources we need to protect the integrity of that system. But I'm appalled at the ongoing conflating of those two, and suddenly the world has come to an end. Let me ask you a question. Mr. Hicks, you're aware of the amounts of money put through the states to assist them with their elections. I've got Michigan's. Michigan received $11.242 million to upgrade their systems. All of their voting machines will be replaced by the August primary, to August 2018. Have you received any further requests from Michigan for funding or support beyond that, sir?
I am not aware of any funding, any other additional requests from Michigan beyond the request from the 300.
So Michigan has not raised a major crisis that our election system in Michigan is suddenly about to come down around our ears at this point?
I'm not aware of any.
I didn't think so. I've talked to the Secretary of State there and know them well. Are you aware, sir, of the review of the City of Detroit's administration 2016 general election?
I am not.
Let me give you some data on that. 392 precincts in the City of Detroit were out of balance. 26% of them, in terms of absentee voting, could not be verified. One Detroit precinct was found to be missing over 250 ballots. They made 6 recommendations. All of them relate to training and staffing of the precincts. Not one, not a single recommendation related to either the voter registration file, electronic records, or the actual ballots, the actual voting. How are we going to support that, given the fact that despite the concerns that some of my colleagues have that the Russians are coming, the majority of the mistakes that are happening are human errors that just multiply and they fail to reconcile. The City of Detroit, if there was a recount in Michigan, by the way, the President won by about 12,000 votes, the City of Detroit could not sustain an audit. It could not sustain a recount because of these problems. How do we support that?
The EAC remains focused, laser focused on all aspects of elections, whether or not that's voter registration, whether or not that's voting equipment, whether or not that's poll worker training, whether or not that's election night reporting. There are about 8,000 jurisdictions across the country, and each jurisdiction has different aspects of it. And we try our best to help each and every one of those jurisdictions function well with the administration of elections through the federal process.
Do you have a current need for additional resources to support training, personnel systems for voting, and what would that be?
I don't have a specific number, but there's always need for additional resources. States are very tied to the fact that they have other things that they focus in on, whether or not that's roads, schools, police, and so forth. Elections is usually looked at as the last. As Mr. Hatch talked about, there are additional ways that Congress can look at providing additional funding to the states.
Yeah, okay, Ms. Oliver, let's switch because you're nodding your head. However, we still want to maintain a system that, in fact, is a state. Our elections are state and local, and not a federal election system. I don't think we want to federalize them. Do you?
No, sir. And speaking on behalf of NAS, the Secretaries of State nationally don't have a position on this issue. Speaking for myself personally, my experience in New Mexico, a state which has truly suffered ever since the economic decline, we can always use more funding. And I personally view conducting our federal, state, and local elections together on one ballot as a partnership. States have always had skin in the game on this issue. We've been doing all the election security work. We would love to have more resources in that regard, from my perspective.
Has your group identified what those resources would be?
Certainly, we can provide you a list, but I agree with you. I think not only do we need to make sure we have the resources to protect in terms of cybersecurity, but we also we have continuing and ongoing needs with regard to training, sure. With regard to resourcing in other ways. So happy to provide you any details you would like.
Thank you. I think any feedback you would have would be appreciated by the committee, and would ask that you provide that. At this point in time, we haven't had any overwhelming requests. We certainly want to support that partnership. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.